Now, the Great Pyramid of Giza is probably the most stunning of all these ancient structures. And the stones are immense, and some of them were cut from a quarry that's hundreds of miles away.
Out on the Giza Plateau, three shapes still cut into the skyline the way they have for 45 centuries. Tourists snap photos, guides recite the same rehearsed facts, and somewhere in the back of almost everyone's mind sits the same unanswered question. How did a Bronze Age civilization actually build this thing? Recently, a team of researchers decided to try something different. Instead of another documentary narrated by Torchlight, they fed Grok, the AI system built by Elon Musk's company xAI, a mountain of raw material, engineering papers, geological surveys, ancient texts, laser scan data, decades of academic argument, and asked it to work through the Great Pyramid of Giza the way an auditor works, through a set of suspicious financial records. No mysticism, no theatrics, just a machine, a pile of evidence, and one blunt question. Does the official story actually balance? What came back wasn't a headline about extraterrestrials or lost civilizations. It was something quieter, and in its own way, far more unsettling. The AI kept landing on the same observation again and again. The confidence with which we describe the construction of the Great Pyramid vastly outpaces the evidence we actually have for it. We know who built it. We know roughly when. We know astonishingly precise things about its geometry. What we do not have and have never had is a fully demonstrated, physically verified method for how the heaviest stones were moved, lifted, and set with the precision that survives today. That gap between certainty and proof is the real story, and it says less about the pyramid than it does about us. Start with what isn't in dispute. Around 2560 BCE, during the reign of the pharaoh Khufu, workers completed a structure that would stand as the tallest building on Earth for the next 3,000 years. It contained somewhere between 2 and 2.5 million blocks of limestone and granite, some weighing as little as 2 tons, others tipping past 70. The base spans 13 acres and is leveled to within a couple of centimeters, a tolerance that would challenge a modern construction crew equipped with lasers and hydraulics, let alone a Bronze Age workforce armed with copper chisels and rope. The 4 sides of the base are oriented to true north with an error smaller than 1/10 of a degree. None of this is contested by mainstream Egyptology. Archaeologists, engineers, and skeptics alike accept these numbers as fact. We also know a great deal about the people who did the work, and it is worth pausing on this because it undercuts one of the oldest myths about the pyramid. For a long time, popular imagination pictured whip-driven slaves hauling stone under a merciless sun. That picture has been dismantled by decades of careful excavation. In the 1990s, archaeologists uncovered a purpose-built settlement just south of the pyramids, complete with bakeries, breweries, medical facilities, and organized housing for thousands of workers. Skeletal remains from the site show healed fractures and even successful amputations, meaning these laborers had access to real medical care and were valued enough to be kept alive and working after serious injury. Graffiti found deep inside relieving chambers above the king's chamber, painted in red ochre by crews who never expected another human eye to see it. Records nicknames like Friends of Khufu, the signature of an actual work gang proud enough of their labor to leave their mark on the most important building project of their age. These were fed, housed, medically treated professionals organized into rotating shifts, not disposable slaves. The human side of the pyramid story is well documented, humane, and genuinely moving. It's the engineering side where the story gets shaky, and it starts with granite. The roof of the king's chamber is built from 9 massive granite beams, each weighing between 40 and 80 tons, quarried not locally but at Aswan, more than 800 kilometers to the south. Getting that stone from the quarry to the plateau alone would have required moving loads far heavier than anything reliably documented in Old Kingdom transport records. We do have solid evidence for how lighter limestone casing blocks made a similar journey. A set of papyrus logs discovered in 2013 at Wadi al-Jarf describe an official named Mirror supervising boat crews who floated limestone from the Tura quarries to Giza via a canal system. That discovery is a legitimate triumph of archaeology, and it strongly supports the idea that large-scale human labor, properly organized, could move enormous quantities of stone. But Mirror's logs describe limestone, not granite, and the difference matters more than it might seem. A 70-ton block of granite is not a scaled-up version of a 2-ton limestone block. It is an entirely different category of engineering problem, one where a single miscalculation on a riverbank or a sledge failure under load could destroy months of labor in an instant. And this wasn't attempted once as a heroic one-off. It happened repeatedly for the roof beams, for the chamber's granite lining, for the massive portcullis blocks used to seal the burial chamber forever. A civilization that treats the transport of 80-ton stones as routine is operating at a level of logistical mastery that the archaeological record has never fully explained, even though the stones themselves prove it happened. Then there's the question of how those blocks got lifted more than 40 meters into the air, inside a structure that was still under construction around them. This is where the how of the pyramid becomes genuinely contested, because every proposed answer has a serious flaw. The simplest theory is a single straight ramp of packed earth and rubble, built up alongside the rising pyramid. The problem is arithmetic. To keep the slope gentle enough for teams to haul multi-ton stones, such a ramp would need to stretch over a kilometer and would itself require more raw material than the pyramid it served. No trace of a ramp anywhere near that scale has ever been found, despite over 2 centuries of survey work on the plateau. A second theory proposes a spiral ramp winding around the pyramid's exterior as it grew. That solves the length problem, but creates a new one. It would have obscured the corners the builders needed to sight against in order to maintain their extraordinary precision, and the sharp turns would have made hauling multi-ton sledges nearly unmanageable. In 2007, French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed a third option, an internal ramp spiraling up through the pyramid's own interior, hidden within the masonry. Some radar and gravity surveys have shown features that could be consistent with internal cavities, but nothing has confirmed the theory outright. 3 plausible ideas, 3 fatal weaknesses, and after more than 200 years of study, not one of them has been proven. The method existed. The pyramid is standing proof of that, but it vanished from the historical record so completely that modern engineers, working with computer modeling and structural analysis, still cannot agree on what it actually looked like in practice. The precision of the finished surface adds another layer to the puzzle. The pyramid originally wore a smooth outer casing of polished white Tura limestone, most of which was stripped away over the centuries to build medieval Cairo. But some of it survives at the base, and when the surveyor Flinders Petrie examined those remaining casing stones in the 19th century, he found joints between multi-ton blocks averaging around half a millimeter. Gaps so tight that a sheet of paper could not be slid between them, filled with a mortar applied with startling evenness across the entire contact surface. A later survey by J.H. Cole in 1925 found the deviation in the length of the pyramid's base sides to be less than 0.1%. That is not the tolerance of stone dragged out of a quarry by hand and shaped with copper tools. That is the tolerance of a precision workshop applied across a structure covering 13 acres and involving millions of separate blocks, with effectively no room for a bad cut or a wasted attempt. According to the AI's synthesis of the available data, no single documented technique, not copper saws, not sand abrasives, not any combination of known Old Kingdom tools, fully accounts for achieving and maintaining that tolerance at that scale over and over for years. And the pyramid is still finding new ways to surprise us. In 2015, an international research effort called the Scant Pyramids Project began using muon tomography, a technique borrowed from particle physics that tracks subatomic particles called muons as they pass through solid rock to essentially X-ray the monument from the outside. In 2017, the technique revealed a previously unknown void roughly 30 meters long sitting above the pyramid's grand gallery, confirmed independently by 3 separate detector teams using different technologies, and significant enough to be published in one of the world's leading scientific journals. In 2023, a second, smaller corridor-like space was confirmed near the pyramid's north face. These weren't discoveries from some early, undercharted era of exploration. They happened within the last decade, inside the single most intensively studied ancient structure on the planet. After 200 years of surveying, mapping, and declaring the pyramid fully understood, brand new instruments kept finding features nobody had ever recorded. This is the pattern the AI kept circling back to. And it's worth stating plainly because it's the actual disturbing conclusion, not some manufactured mystery about ancient visitors. For decades, experts stated as settled fact that slaves built the pyramids, a claim the archaeology has since thoroughly overturned. Researchers confidently argued the Egyptians could not have moved the largest granite blocks without some kind of external assistance, based on incomplete physical modeling. Scholars insisted for generations that the pyramid's interior held no further secrets, right up until muon detectors found a 30-meter void that nobody had suspected. Each time, the field wasn't simply mistaken, it was certain and wrong in roughly equal measure. A machine processing that entire history doesn't care how authoritative a claim sounds or how long it's been repeated in textbooks. It just measures the distance between stated confidence and actual proof, and in this case, that distance is enormous. That's also why the alien explanation, however entertaining, misses the point entirely and arguably gets it backwards. Reaching for outside intervention is the comfortable answer, because it lets us avoid confronting how capable Bronze Age people actually were. It quietly assumes that ordinary humans, using rope, copper, water, and an intimate knowledge of the night sky, simply couldn't have pulled this off, so something else must have stepped in to do it for them. The evidence says the opposite. The Egyptians of the 4th dynasty inherited more than a century of accumulated stoneworking knowledge, stretching back to Djoser's step pyramid, refined generation after generation by master craftsmen who passed their techniques down through hands and memory rather than written manuals. They pushed that inherited knowledge to a limit so extreme that we still can't fully reconstruct how they got there. And then that knowledge disappeared from the written record so completely that it took modern physics, computer modeling, and now large-scale AI synthesis just to start mapping the outline of what they must have known. So the real conclusion isn't about hidden extraterrestrial engineers or forgotten super technology. It's that the story we've told ourselves about the pyramid has always been more confident than it had any right to be. And every time serious new evidence arrives, that overconfidence gets exposed a little further. The people who built the Great Pyramid left their names in a sealed chamber nobody was meant to enter for 4,000 years. They deserve to be remembered as extraordinarily skilled, not explained away. The honest answer to how they did it is still largely that we don't fully know, and the more advanced our tools become, the more clearly that gap shows up. The desert has kept its answer this long. The real question now is whether we're finally humble enough to go looking for it properly.